House of Representatives recently passed 3 bills that they say are aimed at strengthening the legal response to the country's persistent problem with violent crime, particularly murder. These amendments to the Offences Against the Person Act, the Criminal Justice Administration Act, and the Child Care and Protection Act represent what Justice Minister Delroy Chuck describes as a necessary and deliberate response to the high levels of homicide in Jamaica. Today on Lead Story, we're getting reactions to this. And so Lead Story starts now. Welcome to Lead Story. I'm Nika Lewis. On Tuesday, April 29, Justice Minister Delroy Chuck wrapped up the parliamentary debate on 3 key bills aimed at addressing and increasing penalties for the offence of murder under Jamaican law. Before we hear from my guests, let's take a listen to what the minister had to say.
Madam Speaker, as intimated, these bills were placed on the table in February 2023. A joint select committee was put in place in April 2023. We had 11 sittings of the joint select committee, and a report was placed in this House in November of 2023. The debate on this bill started in February of 2024, and a number of persons on both sides spoke on this bill. And we said, I suspended the closing of the debate so that further decision could be taken in respect to the penalty for children. So, Madam Speaker, and I will deal with this today, what nuanced position we have dealt with children. I rise today, therefore, Madam Speaker, to move for the closing of the debates on the Offences Against a Person Amendment Bill, the Criminal Justice Administration Amendment Bill, and the Child Care Protection Amendment Bill, which seek to appropriately treat with and increase the penalties for the offence of murder under Jamaican law. Madam Speaker, these bills represent a necessary and deliberate response to the levels of violent crime in our society, particularly those involved in the most heinous offence, murder. Madam Speaker, Jamaica continues to grapple with unacceptably high levels of homicide. These are not just statistics. They represent real lives lost, sons, daughters, mothers, fathers, taking in acts of cold violence that tear families and communities apart. While, Madam Speaker, the government continues to invest in crime prevention, intelligence-driven policing, and social intervention programs, it is also imperative that the justice system reflects the seriousness of the crimes that continue to undermine public order and confidence in the rule of law. Madam Speaker, these bills are the result of extensive consultation through the Joint Select Committee process, convened from as far back as 2023. We received oral and written feedback from, amongst more, UNICEF, the Jamaican Bar Association, the Office of the Children's Advocate, the Office of the Public Defender, Jamaican Psychological Society, the Office of the DPP, the Faculty of Law, UWI, civil society stakeholders, and many members of the public. We want also to thank the members of the opposition who added their voices to the discourse on these bills and on the report that was tabled. Madam Speaker, I take this opportunity to refresh the House as to the proposed amendments that we started with and we were now coming out of the Joint Select Committee meetings. In respect of the Offence Against a Person Amendment Bill, the bill for non-capital increases the mandatory minimum sentence for imprisonment under Section 3(1)(b) from 15 years to 45 years. For capital murder, increases the mandatory minimum sentence to be served before being eligible for parole from 20 years to 50 years under Section 3(1)(c) subsection A, increases the mandatory minimum sentence to be served before being eligible for parole, where the sentence is imprisonment for life from 15 years to 40 years under Section 3(1)(c)(b). And finally, Madam Speaker, increases the mandatory minimum sentence to be served before being eligible for parole, where a sentence of term of imprisonment is given from 10 years to 35 years under 3(1)(c)(b)(2). Coming out of the Joint Select Committee, Madam Speaker, we have lowered the penalties related to non-capital murder. The mandatory minimum penalty proposed now is 30 years instead of 45 years. Where a term of years has been imposed, the period must be served before becoming eligible for parole is proposed 20 years instead of 35 years. As it pertains, Madam Speaker, to the Criminal Justice Administration Amendment Bill, it seeks to amend Section 42F of the Criminal Justice Administration Act by increasing the term of years to be deemed as life imprisonment from 30 years to 50 years, where the offense committed is murder. The starting point for calculating the reduction in the sentence is usually life imprisonment, and the aim of this proposed amendment is to maintain an incentive scheme for defendants to plead guilty while ensuring that the reduced sentence is not inordinately low, having regard to the serious nature of the offense. Madam Speaker, murder is the most serious offense probably committed in the country, maybe outside of treason. And Madam Speaker, this Parliament has to send the clear and unmistakable message to potential killers that life is sacrosanct, sacred, and when taken, the offender must be prepared and must know that they're going to spend a long time in prison.
Well, there you have it. And we will hear from my guests, Attorney at Law Bert Samuels and Chairman of the Crime Monitoring and Oversight Committee, CMOC, retired Lieutenant Commander George Overton, right after the break.
All your electrical needs, visit ABC Electrical Sales. We've got everything, stocking top brands like CNCs, Philips, and Allen Bradley. We guarantee quality and reliability. Shop with us and save with even free island-wide delivery. Conditions apply. Visit us at Shop 8 Hagley Park Plaza, Kingston 10. Call 876-754-3714-5 or 876-754-3825-8. ABC Electrical Sales, for a better choice in electrical business.
Millions of people are attacked by harmful mouth bacteria. The root cause of bad breath, gum problems, cavities, plaque, and tartar. That's why Colgate combined the best science and technology in Colgate Total. Unlike others, its superior formula fights bacteria and creates a powerful protective barrier for up to 24 hours to prevent them from coming back. Take control of your oral health with Colgate Total.
Hey you know all the people in your business?
You should take advantage of CVM TV's unbeatable small business advertising package. Trust me.
And get your goods and services in front of your customers today.
For $150,000, you get a high-quality professional commercial.
Plus 20 prime-time commercial spots.
That's massive exposure at a fraction of the cost.
Including on the #1 morning show in Jamaica, Sunrise.
So don't wait. Call us on 658-208-5377 and see your business goals happen right here on CVM Television.
Welcome back. You're watching Lead Story. I'm Nika Lewis, and we are talking about 3 bills that were recently passed in the House of Representatives. Now, these bills, they are the Offences Against the Person Amendment Bill, the Criminal Justice Administration Amendment Bill, and the Child Care Protection Amendment Bill. 3 critical pieces of legislation. Joining me for this discussion, we earlier had Attorney at Law Bert Samuels. I gather we're going to get him back. And we also have the chairman of the Crime Monitoring Oversight Committee, retired Lieutenant Commander George Overton. So we have Mr. Overton with us, and I'll start with you then.
Okay, good evening to you, your viewers and listeners.
Thank you so much for joining us. But how do you assess the potential impact of these bills on Jamaica's crime landscape, particularly its homicide rates?
Look, the laws are meant to be a deterrent. And yes, amending the mandatory sentences and the sentencing guidelines, yes, should create the deterrence. But I do believe, as I have heard Mr. Samuels say, is that when you take away the discretion from the judges, very special mitigating circumstances are shut out. They cannot be considered because the minimum mandatory is there, and therefore we may not be delivering justice in the best way. And is it that we want to sacrifice delivering justice the best way for the elimination or reduction in crime? We need to make that choice. I struggle with it because there are many times that I am frustrated by some of the mild sentences that are awarded. But then again, I'm not aware of the circumstances that may have caused the judges to deliver that mild sentence. And I do believe that that's where a lot of people get carried away, that they're frustrated when they don't see a harsh penalty for what we consider in our current environment a critical and unacceptable crime.
Well, we now understand that Mr. Samuels is back with us. Mr. Samuels?
Good afternoon.
Indeed. Tell us, what are your thoughts on this move by the government?
Okay, I'd like to start with what my colleague has said, that punishment is to be a deterrent. And since the year has started, murders have fallen significantly without those powers being in place. So it makes almost a nonsense of the idea that when you increase sentences, then the murder rates will fall. So I want to know, and I'd ask the Minister, what is it that has caused the fall in the murder rates at the time? Because it's certainly not your harsh sentences, which are not yet in place. So the correlation between harshness and the fall in crime as a deterrent is scientifically sometimes not proven. In fact, countries that have the death penalty have found that murders have increased in countries with the death penalty. So we have to have a lot of fact-based information rather than emotion. Secondly, we have a situation where we have a separation of powers in our parliament. Before the Parliament started to set these minimum sentences which must be given, we used to leave it up to our judges who live in the society, who are aware of victims and what they go through. We used to give them the powers of sentence. Now we are finding that the Parliament is sentencing our citizens. And what that does is, it's an offense to the separation of powers. The way I understand government is to operate. The executive, that is the cabinet, sets policy. They take that policy to the parliament and they vote on it and pass laws. They hand those laws to the judges, giving them maximum. In other words, they're giving them the boundaries of sentence. So you could say, to the judges, you can go for life imprisonment, and you're free to give the number of years that you think each case deserves.
Yes.
Now, what we have been led to believe, am I to be stopped? What we have been led to believe is that the parliamentarians do not trust our judges. That's what it comes down to. They have taken from the judges the discretion to impose sentences because there are going to be facts where a judge will give 50 years to a man who is charged for murder. But they say they want to start sentencing people now rather than the judges. And it offends the principle of the separation of powers.
But as we heard earlier, Mr. Overton, in his experience, would have shared what many of us as Jamaicans would have experienced over time, where we hear of a certain heinous crime, and when you hear the judgment, sometimes you're wondering, is that really commensurate? Is it fair? Because it sounded like a much lesser sentence than we the society would have demanded. It's like we're asking for blood and the court offered water.
I like that. You see, sometimes emotionally we ask for blood. So here we go. You send an 18-year-old man to prison for murder for 30 years. When he comes out, he's going to come back out. When he's 48 years, he comes back out. Do we want to have a monster coming out? Because what some people call the prison is that it's college. It's the college where you learn to commit crimes, and you make sure that the persons who are your seniors in the prison teach you how to avoid being caught. So sometimes I don't hear there being a fix of the prisons. I don't hear the prisons are going to be pulled down so that we have modern prisons where persons can be rehabilitated. But I'll tell you this, and I know I'm going to be criticized for this, fixing prisons don't give you votes. When you announce harsh sentences, those give you votes. And we know what 2025 is about. So here we have a minister standing up with the murder rate having fallen already, saying that he needs these harsh sentences to prevent murders, when they are being prevented by whatever means. So there needs to be a study. Thank you.
All right, we're going to ask you, well, I'm seeing that you took a pause there, but we're going to come back after the break and continue on this discussion because things are heating up.
Join my private room. Only $1,000 for a grand time.
That I know me. We never said that. But who going to believe me?
That is correct. $4,350,000. Yes, go ahead. $4 million? I never approved that.
Yes, me go doctor tomorrow. So me have to get the money today, no longer. Then no me face that. We never make no record or beg nobody no money.
Deepfakes are AI-generated images and videos made to look and sound like people we know and trust. They're used to spread misinformation, destroy reputations, and are used to commit fraud and scams.
Don't fall victim to deepfakes. Protect yourself. For more information, visit broadcastingcommission.org or scan the QR code on screen.
Every day starts with care. Care that's always close. Supermed Family of Pharmacies is where you go for everything you need. From your morning routine to life's biggest moments. Supermed Family of Pharmacies is always by your side. Whether it's prescriptions or household essentials, trust the care that's close to home. Super happy, super healthy, Supermed.
The internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winford Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8 p.m. on CVM TV.
So much more than entertainment.
Welcome back to Lead Story. We're talking about the amendment of 3 critical pieces of legislation meant to deter criminals and to thwart crime in Jamaica. We have with us the chairman of the Crime Monitoring Oversight Committee, CMOC, retired Lieutenant Colonel George Overton. Well, retired Lieutenant Commander. I'm giving you a different post, sir.
You're promoting me.
Yes. And we have as well Senior Defense Attorney, Mr. Bert Samuels. So before we went to the break, Mr. Samuels touched several major points about the lack of rehabilitation of sorts in the prison system in Jamaica. And he also talked about the fact that we're in an election year of sorts. And so we have to be mindful of how we are making some of these changes. But Mr. Overton, do you believe enough is being done on the preventative and the rehabilitative side of crime fighting, so to speak, to focus, or is the focus rather too heavily on punishment?
Well, I have to agree with Mr. Samuels that when we send our people to prison, we send them to the University of Crime. Because just to survive in that environment, you have to become a violent person and you have to become a part of what is happening within the institution. So yes, we have to focus on the rehabilitation of our people who are given custodial sentences. But I do believe that we have to have trust and confidence in the judges. What we have done here with these legislations is taken away the judges' ability to consider any special mitigating circumstance that they must deliver the minimum mandatory sentence once the person is found guilty. All other considerations have to be brushed aside if the person is guilty. And I don't think that was the intent. I don't think that is the good delivery of justice. Yes, have harsh maximum sentences so that the judges can exercise that where it warrants it. But when you have no persons who may have made an understandable mistake or an error which has caused them to be charged under this section, and they end up with a 30 or 40-year sentence with no alternative, and the judge has nothing that they can do in that matter. It's not good delivery of justice.
So you're not subscribing necessarily to the phrase where people say prevention is better than cure, because prison sounds like trying to cure.
But we have entrusted our judges to be able to exercise their own judgment of what is before them and deliver what they consider to be a fair punishment for the act. They must be able to take all the mitigating circumstances into consideration. Here the law says that yes, the person may be guilty and the judge can only deliver what the minimum sentence is. He can't exercise any discretion in that.
Understood. Mr. Samuels, want to bring you back in, because what alternatives would you suggest that could achieve justice for victims while still respecting the court's autonomy?
It's a simple thing. Put the outer band to the judges and allow them to look at each case. There are social inquiry reports that come. There are victim statements made by the victims, weigh in the balance, and the judges will give what sentence they think is just. I can give you my experience in court. There was an ex-soldier who was charged for a serious offense, and he was to be sentenced. He called the Member of Parliament to come and testify to his character. Member of Parliament came and spoke of him being a good person. He's an ex-soldier, and therefore asked the judge to have mercy on him. What did the judge say to the Member of Parliament? You have tied my hands. I would have given this man 7 years, but you have tied my hands to 15 years. I don't have a choice. Thank you, Member of Parliament.
Wow. So you believe
that given to that particular Member of Parliament, because he no doubt, yes.
So much of that is what you perceive is happening here now with what has happened in the Parliament. Final thoughts in 30 seconds.
Yes. When I listened to the Minister Chuck, what I heard him saying is the things that judges are to say. You know, sentence must reflect the condition of the victim. It must be taken into consideration what the public thinks. These are things that judges say every day in the courtroom. Mr. Chuck has come out of his lane and speaking as though he's a judge to sentence persons. I don't agree with it.
All right. Lieutenant Commander Overton.
I can only concur with Mr. Samuels.
Wow. Well, that's all the time we have, gentlemen. Thank you so much. You've been great guests as always. So that is retired Lieutenant Commander George Overton, the chairman of the CMOC, as the Crime Monitoring Oversight Committee, and Senior Defense Attorney, Mr. Bert Samuels. Thank you so much. That's all the time we have on Lead Story. Join us at the top of the hour for the news.
Hey you know all the people in your business?
You should take advantage of CVM TV's unbeatable small business advertising package. Trust me.
And get your goods and services in front of your customers today.
For $150,000, you get a high-quality professional commercial.
Plus 20 prime-time commercial spots.
That's massive exposure at a fraction of the cost.
Including on the #1 morning show in Jamaica, Sunrise.
So don't wait. Call us on 658-208-53.